What's up, boss? This is Abraham's wallet. We span the gap between the austerity of obedience to God and the prosperity rising from faithfulness. Run your home and your dough like a biblical boss.
Hey everybody, Mark's about to say that this episode is only him, but he's about to lie. You're about to hear a lie from Mark because later in the episode, I will jump in like an uninvited stranger, like Kramer crashing in the door. I'm jumping in at about 15 minutes. So just hang on and enjoy this episode. Here we go.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Abraham's Wallet podcast. I'm going to start out. I'm just going to rip this Band-Aid off. I have some news that I wish I didn't have to share. I was getting ready this morning to record this podcast with occasional guest co-host Steven Manuel, who you might know from this podcast. And he called me and said, he actually texted me. He was in no shape to call and said that he is down with the flu. He said that he was sick. And it was one of those sickness types that you can't really fight through. He's down with a stomach bug. So it's just going to be me today. And I know that I wanted to get it out there on the front end in case you had something else to do with your hour. But I do think that I've got some interesting material to cover with you that even if you are listening to this on, I think maybe December 28th is when this will come out, I'm trying to give you a few last-minute year-end checklist items to cover when it comes to your financial world that might help you out as you're closing out the year. So hope you had a wonderful Christmas. I just got back from New York City. I was down there for a couple days. It was my wife and I's anniversary, and our first date full stop was actually at the Macaroni Grill in Princeton, New Jersey. And it was not a wonderful experience. I'll tell that story sometime. But our first real where I kind of borrowed a fancy coat from a buddy, and I remember going to like Marshall's or something and buying a pair of slacks because I was just a college kid that didn't dress up that often, and took her to New York City, went to a fancy restaurant and a show, and we got a picture in front of the Rockefeller Christmas tree, and that was our first kind of real fancy date. And so I thought for our anniversary we would recreate that, and just to kind of throw a nod to some of the travel perks episodes we've done in the past, I was very close to obtaining status on Delta Airlines and really wanted that. So a little bit of an ulterior motive, but we went to New York City just for about 48 hours and saw a show. We got another selfie in front of that Rockefeller tree. You can see that selfie on YouTube if you are watching there. And it was fun. It made me remember that I think you can't really find anywhere else where the food is as good and unplentiful as New York. Maybe San Francisco and once in a while Chicago have some claim to that title, but it's pretty hard to beat New York. And I'm always ready to leave within about 36 hours of arriving. So that was that. It was fun times. And the other thing I was going to say, I almost jumped on the Volley channel. If you are on the Volley channel, then you know what the Volley channel is. So I don't have to tell you. But I almost jumped on and invited some random follower supporter to jump on this podcast with me. I just think podcasts can be any more fun when there's a little bit of banter and back and forth. But didn't do it today, might do it in the future. And I think if you have no idea what Volley is, it's a platform that a lot of our listeners are on, and they can talk to us, they can talk to each other. We can kind of work things out. We can argue about stuff that Steven or I have said on past episodes. And that's something that is open to people who support us. If you want to hear more about that, go to abrahamswallet.com/donate, and you can find out about our Volley channel, about supporting us, all that. So let's get into it because I've got a lot to cover and not a lot of time to cover it. So First thing, this might not surprise you if you have been around these parts very long, but the first thing I'll say, if you're wondering, hey, I don't have time to do 20 different things when it comes to my money at year end, if I only have the energy and time to do one big thing next year for my overall household financial picture, I am going to recommend something that might surprise you. Maybe not if you've been around here very long, but I think that should be an annual summit. So we plug our annual summit here a lot. It is a weekend away that we have designed for a husband and wife to survey the past year, review what happened, plan for the next year, dream together, kind of refresh and touch on family vision if that's something that you haven't nailed down as a family. And I think it's probably one of the most important things you can do to set yourself up, even just to say, hey, what happened last year? There are years when you come to that summit and you go, we're a little bit shell shocked. This was a rough year. And there's other years where you go, holy smokes, we are overflowing with good stuff. And it's good to note those things down. If you go to abrahamswallet.com, to the blog, the first thing you'll see is a post about the new summit guide. If you join our email list, which you can do in all sorts of buttons on that website, you will get a copy of the Gold Summit mailed to you. And because we're talking about money stuff mostly today, one of the most important things about the summit is bring your money stuff to the summit when you go do that. If you can't easily and pretty quickly produce a document that says, here's how much we spent this last year and what we spent it on, then you need to fix that. So maybe I'll even back up a bit. You might be saying, Mark, I don't have time for a summit. Okay, fine. But if you don't have a budgeting tool that you can just push a few buttons and say, here's how everything I've spent, then I think you have to make that one of your top priorities. It's almost impossible. And I say this to Steven all the time. I don't care if you make $1 million a year or $40,000 a year. It is almost impossible to have a well-ordered financial home if you are not budgeting your money, which just means I know every dollar that comes under my care, I know where I'm placing it, and I'm doing that intentionally. And that doesn't mean we're stuffing it all into savings accounts and investments and giving it all away. Those are all things you will be doing, but some of the money you're going to say, I'm going to use this to go have a good time. And that's totally fine. But the budgeting tool I've been recommending a ton lately is called Monarch Money. It has replaced Mint as my top budgeting app. Mint is still cool because it's free, but Monarch is a few bucks a month, and all the early returns from clients of ours have said that this thing just beats the pants off of Mint. Way easier to use, much better user interface. If you want an app that you can kind of look down at, have on both your wife's and your phone, this is a good one to start with. And if you don't like it, we have an article on the website that shows you a full review of every budgeting app that we could find. So go pick one. I don't care what you use. Okay, number 2, you've done your summit. What else? Or you probably haven't done. If you're listening to this on December 28th, you probably haven't done your summit, but you've scheduled it. It's worth running a tax projection, and this is something we do with our clients every year. But reviewing year-to-date income and withholdings or any estimated tax payments you've made is a useful exercise at the end of the year. If you figure out that you've underpaid for the year and maybe are even going to face penalties, you should talk to a professional about that. There are some pretty slick tricks to avoid underpayment penalties, but that's probably beyond the level of DIY work here on Abraham's Wallet podcast. But also, you may have overpaid. Most people, especially when they're starting out, tend to overpay taxes throughout the year. And you can go to your HR forms at work if you're employed and adjust the withholdings to prevent that from happening. So running a tax projection, it doesn't have to be super complex. You could even just ballpark it. But there's a lot of tools out there that'll give you an estimate, and you can pull up a pay stub or your payroll tool and just say, how much have I paid into taxes this year? How much do we think I'm going to owe? And are those numbers relatively close? All right. Next, retirement contributions and retirement account stuff. This is kind of a whole bucket, but for a few account types, December 31st is the last day to get money into those accounts for the year. And with retirement accounts, you're limited to how much you can put in. So I like to say it's not a disaster if we skip a year of maxing out retirement accounts, but if you can do it, the one thing you can't do is go back and put in money right now for 2021. So it's a good idea to at least be very sure about the decision you make, because this is not one that can get reversed. Whereas if you have a goal to save in another type of investment account and you get a little behind, you can just catch up later. With 401ks, that's the most common type of retirement account that employed people tend to have through their employer. You can put money in to that account. It's a little late for that if you're listening to this right now, although there's still a chance that you could get some money in depending on kind of how your employer structures that. Another thing that a lot of our clients will do is something called a backdoor Roth conversion. You have until you file taxes to put money into an individual retirement account. So we're not up against a deadline there, although I often tell people it's not a bad idea to think in calendar years when you're doing IRAs, because if you kind of said, well, I can't quite come up with it now, I'll do it by tax filing deadline, then we're fairly into next year by the time you've made the contribution for 2022, and we have less time, to catch up and do the contribution for 2023, unless you just always go on tax filing deadline, which is fine. But you have some time on just plain old contributions. But a lot of clients and just listeners make more than what you're allowed to make if you want to contribute to a Roth IRA. So in 22, the limit where it starts phasing out how much you can contribute is making $204,000 a year. So if you're making that much, big high five, that's awesome. But you can't put money directly into a Roth IRA. And if you do, it kind of ends up a headache to back that money out. Guys, this is a late breaking news. Steven Manuel is en route to his office and he wants to join this podcast. So I think we'll keep these, and I'm going to finish this one and then we'll see if he's actually able to contribute. If you can't make a contribution directly to a Roth IRA, which is an individual retirement account that you've already been taxed on those dollars, they go in, they grow tax free. And then when you want to pull them out, when you turn at least 59 and a half, you don't have to pay taxes on that money. So that's different than a 401k, a traditional 401k where you have to pay tax when it comes out, but you don't get taxed when it goes in. If you want to make one of these Roth IRA contributions and you make more than $204,000 in 2022, you have to use what's called a backdoor Roth conversion. So the way it works, this is kind of silly, but you put money into a traditional IRA, and then if you want to, 2 minutes later, you convert it into a Roth IRA. That has to be done by calendar year end. So if you're doing a backdoor Roth conversion, you need to do it now. It's also a good idea to get a grip on any accounts that you intend to contribute to, but haven't yet. Like I said, IRAs, you have until tax deadline. The same is true if you use a SEP IRA. So a self-employed person might use a SEP IRA or a solo 401k to put some money aside pre-tax. You don't have deadlines on that, but it's a good idea to kind of figure out exactly where you're at for the year. And if you, I guess my note here is if you are just making some basic retirement contributions and you have no clue if you're saving enough, a lot of people just put all of this retirement savings thing on autopilot and they say, well, I'm going to contribute enough to get the match and hope that works out. That is not a financial plan, and you probably need a financial plan. So you can create one yourself. You can use a tool to say, am I on track to save enough? Or you can work with a professional, which is what Steve and I do all day long with our day jobs. So there's a lot of options there. if you find yourself in that spot of, hey, we need a financial plan and we don't just want to mindlessly save money. Believe it or not, I actually run into people who save too much money into retirement accounts and don't really enjoy their lives along the way. So there's a lot of value in just taking time at the end of the year and going, we have been a little aimless with our savings. If that's you, maybe consider a financial plan. If you want to talk to us about that, you would have to go over to our actual business, not our 501c3 nonprofit, which is here at Abraham's Wallet. And we do financial planning at Outpost Advisors. So find us there. I'm going to pause and see if I can find Mr. Manuel, or if perhaps he only made it halfway to the office and is now retching on the side of a frozen Cincinnati road. So I'll either be back or we'll both be back in just a minute. Steven, you have entered the room.
Thank you for welcoming me so hospitably. It's great to be here.
Well, let me tell you what I've covered. Yeah, step 1 was year-end financial checklist item, schedule an annual summit. So I talked a little bit about the benefits of an annual summit, and then I don't know if maybe some people walked out of the building because they felt like I was too harsh, but I said, if you don't have a tool where you can actually bring your money picture into your summit and easily produce a document that says, here's how much we spent and what we spent it on, then you're in dereliction of your duty, and you need to do that. So I recommended a tool, the old Monarch Money, that I guess that's kind of a big news item, is that I've officially switched my favorite tool from Mint over to Monarch. But that was tip number 1.
Good. I'm reminded, as you speak of switching allegiances, I don't know if you've mentioned this anywhere. I don't think we've told anything to the folks, but we're always on the lookout for great rates on savings accounts. Have you heard any good news about rates on savings accounts like I have?
Well, the account that we use a lot to refer clients to, Flourish, which is an invite-only platform, meaning
that's the one.
If you're hearing this, you can't just go sign up for Flourish. You have to be invited by a financial planner. And that platform is paying 4%, which is a little bit bananas gorilla.
That is the news. And I would want everyone, if you have a checking account somewhere and you're just sitting there making zero money, but there's several $1,000s in it, why don't you make 4% on it? By getting in contact with somebody who can invite you into the Flourish or Flourish platform, depending on which part of the country you're from. Okay, so
it would be interesting to see if we could extend that invite to Abraham's Wallet listeners. I think we could. So look in the show notes for a link, and if we figured out how to do it, then you'll see a link.
Okay, I just want to piggyback on what you said regarding if you don't have an easy way to kind of look at your financial picture on your summit, then your phrase was dereliction of duty, which I like that, but I thought you were going to go all the way, and I was prepared to correct you. If you said, if you don't have this ready, you shouldn't even be doing a summit, and I was going to go, whoa, tap the brakes there. There's still value in doing your summit without the financial stuff. We just don't think it's the best way to do a summit. So just to throw that in.
Well, I was trying to hit them with some truth before I hit them with love.
Challenge is often a good precursor to invitation. So that's just fine.
If you want some extra hot sauce on your podcasting life this week and you haven't heard it, this is just a free plug. Go over and listen to the Jeremy Pryor episode with Steven, because I heard that yesterday and it was awesome.
Was it the one about truth?
Yeah.
Oh, that was published? I did not know that was published, but I would like to affirm and confirm what you just said, which is I really recommend people go to the Jeremy Pryor podcast, and I'll put a link in the show notes, and go listen to our painfully brief. For me, it was painfully brief conversation about truth and how truth is really taking a bloody nose in the marketplace of ideas right now.
Yeah. Anybody who follows us on Twitter already has had a link to it, because
There you go.
I've been tweeting up a storm the last few days, as I've been sort of in that liminal space between, are we full on working right now, or
Right.
is it holidays? And I will tell you,
it is limbo. We're the undead. We're between vacation and working.
I will tell you that used to be true. And then I became a financial planner, and it has been some of the more busy days of my life. The reason being, a lot of people are thinking through their year-end financial checklist. And that's something that I'm involved in. And so we're going to get right back to it now.
Please. You just roll.
Next one, generosity. If you're just a family that doesn't really do much tax deductible giving, this may not be as relevant to you. Although I have found that it's easy when you have a generosity fund to just let it grow, and then you go, well, we've got $10,000 in here that we meant to give away and we haven't. So this isn't just a tax tip. Although if you are going to make year-end tax deductible gifts, then one of the things you should do is make those before the year end.
Right. That's why they call it that.
Right. The only other tip I have here is, if you're going to make any sort of decent sized gifts, and you have appreciated assets, so maybe you've got a taxable investment account that has been growing for the past 10 years, or grandma bought you some stock that you go, man, she paid $2 a share for this, and now it's worth $50 a share. And if I ever sell it, I'm going to owe a ton of taxes. You should not give cash to charitable organizations if that's you. You should talk
us through that.
You should give appreciated assets. We've done a whole episode on giving appreciated assets. Let's say you want to give a $100 gift, and you have stocks that you paid $50 for and are now worth $100. Well, if you sold that stock, you would have $100, but now you would owe capital gains tax on the $50 that they grew in value. Instead, you could take that stock and give it to the charitable organization, and you would get a $100 tax deduction, just like if you had given them cash. Now, instead of taking that cash and giving it to them, you're going to take that $100 you were thinking about giving them, and you're going to just buy the stock back that you gave them. Now what you have is the same amount of stock you started with, but there's no baked in capital gains. So you have effectively erased the capital gains in your stock and done the exact same amount of giving to a charitable organization. So that is useful. And
it's a clever move.
It can be super helpful as you invest over time and develop more and more assets that have appreciated. It can actually have a pretty meaningful impact on your wealth, and maybe even encourage you to be more regularly generous. Who knows?
Yes.
Next step. Any other thoughts on generosity, Steve?
Well, my 2 cents, again, my family's right in the teeth of this right now. We're nearing year end like everybody else. And we are talking about, I just want to give a little moment of coaching, which is, if you have money to give and your default is thoughtlessly is the wrong word. We do the most convenient thing, which is we write a big check to the local church, maybe throw a little way to the Salvation Army, Red Cross, I don't know, wherever your heart is. My dad was very into the March of Dimes. And that's what you do. Thank you for being a giver. You're reflecting God's heart by doing this. But I would just challenge you to ask a question. What charitable giving could we do that's most in line with our family's vision? If we are a family that loves rescue, we love redemption, well, then let's give to things that further redemption, the kind that we believe in the world. If we're evangelists, that's what our family's like, then are you giving to places where you think evangelism is happening A+ 100%. And you go, that's such a beautiful fire. I want to throw more wood on that and get that thing blazing even bigger. I would just encourage everybody to give according to the vision of your family and not just into the big pots that everybody else gives to. That's my 2 cents on pushing your vision out into the world.
Amen. Okay, we're gonna get a little bit more technical here.
Good.
Next
Geek
step:
it up.
max out your HSA, health savings account. So if you have a high deductible health plan that qualifies you to contribute to a health savings account, you have, now this is a little confusing because it's not December 31st. You have until the tax filing deadline with no extensions. So to add funds to your HSA account. So if you have a family, you can do $7,300 for 2022. And this is the only account that money goes into tax-free, grows tax-free, and can come out of tax-free if you're using it for qualified health expenses.
Hallelujah.
And we've talked about HSA hacking in the past, but the way to really do this, if you can swing it,
Link in the show notes.
What's that?
There's a link in the show notes to that article.
Okay. The way to do this is, if you can swing it, you take the $7,300, you stick it in the HSA, and then when you have healthcare expenses throughout the year, you budget for those and just pay them out of your household operations budget. You don't dip into the HSA, but you save the receipts.
Smart.
And if you have a normal family of, say, 5 people, by the time you get to age 65, there's a good chance you've spent several $100,000 over the years on all sorts of eligible expenses. And you can reimburse yourself later for expenses you spent now. There's no statute of limitations on there. And so I've kind of shifted recently from calling the HSA like a top priority to calling it the best investment account there is.
Strong language.
So assuming you don't have a compelling health reason not to use one, like you've got a condition where, hey, we would just be spending tons more if we had a high deductible plan versus a standard plan, that would be a reason not to do this. But if you just kind of have a regular old, we spend some years more, but usually pretty low healthcare expenses, then I think the HSA might be the best thing you can do in terms of long-term savings accounts, because like I said, goes in, you don't pay taxes on the money, grows tax-free, and can come out tax-free. And even if you don't use it all and don't have those receipts to pull it all out tax-free, once you turn retirement age, it becomes just like an IRA, and you can pull money out of it just like an IRA. So, cool account.
Beautiful.
Let's say you don't have an HSA, you have a traditional health plan, and you used an FSA. This is where your employer lets you set aside pre-tax money for, there's 2 popular kinds, a child care or dependent care flex spending account and a healthcare flex spending account. You can't have a healthcare FSA and a healthcare HSA that you contribute to at the same time. So if you're contributing to an HSA, you probably don't have access to an FSA, and vice versa. But the difference in these accounts is that they are, unlike an HSA, use it or lose it, which means if you did a healthcare FSA and you put, say, $2,000 in that, you have to use it. You can only roll over a tiny bit of that to the next year. Otherwise, it just goes away. It goes into your employer's plan expenses and things like that. So you can get on FSAstore.com and everything they sell is eligible. I remember doing this one year, and I had quite a bit that I needed to spend. So I bought enough Band-Aids for a very long time. We're still living off of those. And you can buy kind of first aid stuff. We bought really cool first aid kits for all of our cars, which you feel like a boss when somebody gets, we've never had a serious injury, but we've had like pretty big old gash, cut, wound. And somebody's like, does anybody have a Band-Aid? And I come out and I've got the the paramedic level first
Yeah.
aid kit. I just felt really cool about that.
Yeah, using all of any emergency equipment that you just feel this like vindication. It's so sweet. I always kind of like once a year like check on the little emergency kit that's in like a hatch in the back of my car. Okay, the stuff's always there, and I just think someday, someday I'll be broken down and I'll need a foil blanket, and here it is. And if
Yes.
you ever get to use those things, like I've got this really genius little battery thing that can jump a car anywhere, and it's real portable and great. If I use that, I just walk away feeling like a champion. So thank you, FSA.
Yeah. So use your FSAs or you lose them. It's a little harder to use the dependent care one last second. So if you're hearing this, you want to plan for that, but you have to use the dependent care FSA on qualified childcare expenses, which means you can't just pay your babysitter with Venmo. They actually have to be either on payroll or it can be a childcare facility. Certain preschools qualify. So,
And you would say that it would be immoral to purposefully injure any of your family members just to use year-end money. Is that true?
purposefully injure.
Uh-huh.
I mean, are they being injured in kind of an instructive fashion? Like if I had a son and I said, "This is the time I'm going to take you into the boxing ring and show you what it feels like to get hit." No, I don't know. I don't have a son, so this is all hypothetical. My favorite item in my first aid kit is the stitch kit, which I did get to stitch somebody with once. So
Whoa.
yeah,
Huh.
that'll make your kid's eyes get big if you threaten to stitch them up. The quit complaining about the scraped knee. Okay, that's FSAs. Next and related is check in on your employee benefits. So, did your employer switch healthcare plans? Or did your family situation, did you have a baby? Or maybe there was a dependent that moved out? Or did your health situation change? Holy cow, I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and that's going to completely change my health picture. So what worked last year doesn't work this year. You just want to make sure that your plan still makes sense for your family. I do see people go with a lot of times, especially if they're doing well financially, they've got some extra change. They'll just go with the premium healthcare plan, the most expensive one, because that's a good thing to do for your family. And sometimes that actually ends up costing them more for less good coverage, depending on their like how they use healthcare and things like that. So don't just put no thought into this. If you need help going through all your plans, that's something a financial planner can help you with and should be doing if they're doing a good job. So if you don't understand the ins and outs of the plans being offered, get somebody to help you with it. But usually you can kind of read the plan documents that your company provides and figure that out. Couple other things. If you work at a big company, there's a lot of Procter and Gamble people in Cincinnati, for example. That's a very big company. Dig through that employee manual and find out if you have any discounts that you might not be taking advantage of. I was delighted recently to find out that as I was getting an oil change, the guy in front of me goes, yeah, I have the Intermountain Healthcare discount. And I thought, well, my wife works at Intermountain Healthcare. And so I said, hey, my wife works at Intermountain Healthcare. And he's like, oh, yeah, it's like $30 off of a $100 oil change.
Wow.
So I would have known that if I had just spent time going through all the different discounts that her company has negotiated with local
Great
vendors.
point.
So cell phone bills can be lowered. There's sometimes travel deals to be had. Just take 10 minutes and read through anything your employer gives you about discounts.
Yeah, that's a great point. We didn't talk about this with our recent credit card episode, but it's always a good idea to revisit. Just go online and just look at the benefits of holding any credit card. And if you're not taking full advantage, for instance, I know you have that platinum Amex card, Mark, and I have a buddy that has it. And he was telling me, oh, well, the end of the year, I always go and buy something at Nordstrom because I have it gives me $100 credit to Nordstrom every year. I'm like, what? Your credit card does that?
you're slightly confusing the benefit.
Okay, go
It's
ahead.
it's not Nordstrom, it's Saks Fifth Avenue.
Okay, there it is.
And you have to use it in two $50 chunks. You only get
Okay.
$50 per half. And let me tell you, when I looked, there was one item that I could find at $50 or less, and it was a 3-pack of Polo Ralph Lauren undies, which
There
I
you
did
go.
buy, but they got holes in them faster than my Costco Puma undies. Like,
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. But the point remains that you should be familiar with the benefits on your credit cards and use them all. If you're in a situation like I am, where I happen to be in a union, it's not my normal job, but I'm in a writers union as a screenwriter. And there's so many savings opportunities in that union, but it's not in front of my face all the time. And I don't think of it. And we're going to go see It's a Wonderful Life.
Bert, do you know me?
Know you? You kidding? I've been looking all over town trying to find you. I saw your car piled into that tree down there, and I thought maybe you... Hey, your mouth's bleeding. Are you sure you're all right?
What you... My mouth's bleeding, Bert! My mouth's bleeding! Zoot pedals! Zoot... There they are! Bert! What do you know about that? Merry Christmas!
Well, Merry Christmas.
Merry!
Which is showing here nearby in a couple of nights. Do I love to see It's a Wonderful Life on a gigantic 50-foot screen? Yes, I do, with the family and some popcorn. Yes, I do. And see the lessons that George Bailey learns. He is a rich man. That's a good lesson. But because of my union, I don't have to pay for those tickets. I can say, oh, this is professional enrichment because I'm getting an artistic exposure to something that I do, which is to write a script. So be familiar with all the benefits in your life and exploit them. I just think there's a couple things to do at year end. Just refresh your memory about, okay, now this credit card does this. Oh, I get more money back if I use this one buying groceries. I haven't been doing that. I just got to remember to keep that, those little updates, kind of like the kind of permanent coupons in your life. Just be familiar.
Yeah. And thank you for throwing yourself in front of that bus that I was about to roll out and go down too much of a rabbit trail about my undies. You really stopped us from falling into the ditch.
We get it. We kind of get it. Thank you.
Yeah. As I review people's benefits info, I do see some weird stuff sometimes. I've seen more and more employers are offering pet insurance, but not offering adoption assistance. And so if this is your employer, this is also a good time to think about where will I be looking for a new job next year. But yeah,
that's right. And
okay.
you can put it into your summit as a prayer item. Lord, could we find an employer that we work for that is more in alignment with our values and beliefs? That'd be nice.
Now, I didn't plan this, but the underwear conversation was an apropos segue into our next checklist item, which is to consider a bunching strategy.
So in this scenario, you're going for bunching. This is something that you want to have happen. Is that right?
That's right. It's like that time, I don't know, in the, say, mid 80s until the late 2010s, where people thought it was reasonable to wear just boxer shorts. I don't understand it.
In public.
Boxer brief is so much more efficient. Still offers the confidence and coverage of a boxer short. But anyways, no bunching.
Yeah, no bunching.
We've written and podcasted about this, so this is just a reminder. But if you're looking at a past tax return and you realize that your itemized deductions, so maybe you own a house and pay some property taxes and some mortgage, you have some mortgage interest costs, and you did a little giving, and your itemized deductions, that total amount you get to deduct, is pretty close to the amount of the standard deduction, which is what you get to take even if you had none of those things. You didn't give $1, you don't have any property ownership, no state and local taxes. If those two amounts are pretty close together, then you might be a candidate, my friend, for some bunching.
Oh,
And what this is where every other year, 1 year, you'll try to do as much of those expenses packed into 1 year as possible so that your itemized deduction ends up maybe almost twice as big as it would be if you spread it out over 2 years. And then in the alternating years, you take the standard deduction, which is close to what you would have had as your itemized deduction anyways. So you end up in sum getting a much bigger deduction. So how would you do this? Well, you can often pay 2 years of real estate taxes in 1 year. I know in Texas, for example, you can pay your property tax in December and January. So you can pay it in December for the coming year and in January for the current year, which means if it was 2022, I would have paid for my 22 property taxes in January, and then I would have paid for my 23 taxes right now in December. And I would have been able to deduct both of those on 1 year's tax return. The other couple big ones are you can use a donor advised fund to officially do all your giving in a single year. So a donor advised fund is a fund that lets you put money into a vehicle and you get the tax deduction right away. You can actually do what we said earlier and put appreciated assets into that. And you get the tax deduction now. So I might say, I'm going to fund this with $10,000, even though my normal giving was $5,000 per year. And I can put it in here and I can either leave it in cash or I can invest it and let it grow. And then I can tell this fund, I want you to send my local church a check for $500 every month. And so the church will continue to get their monthly contribution, but I will get the tax punch all at once for 2 years worth of giving.
and the government sees that money that goes into the donor advised fund as
Given.
tax
Yes.
benefit.
When you move it to the donor advised fund, it has been given in their eyes because you don't get to ever take it back out. You can't say, actually, I need that money. You gave it away.
Why doesn't every person who gives charitably regularly have a donor advised fund?
There's a few reasons. So there is a cost to these. It's pretty minimal. So for me, I use a donor advised fund and I just put the money in and then immediately send the money out. And I usually use it because I'm trying to give stock to small organizations that don't have the capacity to accept stock, although they should. Because as you know, Abraham's Wallet is not one of the largest 501c3s in the country, but we do accept stock transfers.
That much we do.
But yeah, that's one of the things. If you're going to carry a balance of $100,000, some people even give these to their kids. It's like an inheritance thing. Hey, you inherit the donor advised fund. That can actually have significant fees over time. So that's something to consider. So a lot of people will just have their real estate taxes paid through their mortgage. And that will automatically, so one of the steps to doing this is if you have your taxes paid through your mortgage, call your mortgage lender and say, I'd like to stop doing that. And I'm going to, instead of putting money each month into an escrow account as a part of my mortgage, I'm going to save it so that come December, it's just sitting there and ready for me to pay. But it shouldn't be any change in your cash flow aside from a few days earlier or later to pay your tax bill.
Okay.
Okay, so that's bunching. The only other one is if you are spending more than 10% of your adjusted gross income on healthcare expenses, then those become deductible. You can try to pack those all into a single year. I think all of us do this if we've ever hit the healthcare deductible. You like wake up in October and you go, man, we had a lot of healthcare stuff this year. What can we get done now?
Absolutely.
So that's another thing to think about that adds to your itemized deductions.
Yes.
Okay. The next one, review your assets to take maximum advantage of tax situations when you have options. So this is a little less straightforward, but some assets like stocks held in an IRA don't present much choice to you when you're 35 years old in terms of tax decisions. Those are just going to keep growing. They're not being taxed now. And you can kind of say that's long term, no decisions to be made. But other assets, particular things like stock compensation. So I talked about Procter and Gamble earlier. If you work for a big publicly traded company and they give you shares of equity in the company, there's a lot of decisions sometimes that can significantly impact how much tax you pay on them. So incentive stock options are probably the most riddled with decisions because you can choose how you want to be taxed on those. And then there's restricted stock units and there's non-qualified stock options. So there's a lot of ways that companies that give stock can give it, and they all have different tax implications. And I am not about to try and explain what they all are on this podcast, but I do think it's important to map out your equity compensation and be sure you're appropriately planning for these different stock grants and vesting and things that happen over time. Because what I've seen is these can shock people and they go, wait a second, I owe an extra $20,000 of taxes this year. And it's like, yeah, you were granted $100,000 of stock.
Yep.
May it all be so for our listeners that they get granted $100,000 of stock, but they need to be ready to have cash on hand to pay taxes on those grants. And there's decisions to be made is all I'm saying.
You know what it sounds like to me for somebody in that situation? You got to get yourself a financial advisor that understands the ins and outs of something like stock options.
Yeah, if you don't understand it, this is a place where there's a lot of value to be added by somebody who can actually show you over long periods of time the different implications of different strategies around how you deal with stock compensation. Mm-hmm. And then there's things in the middle. We talked about this when we talked about giving, but investments held in a taxable brokerage account. I see this happen sometimes. People have an investment account, but they didn't make a ton of money in income during the year. So they might be they might have made $75,000. Well, they're under the 0% capital gains tax bracket, which means capital gains for them, like what we talked about when if you give the stock that was worth 100 that you paid 50 for, if you sold that, normally you'd owe tax on $50. If you're under a certain income threshold, you're in the 0% capital gains tax bracket.
Hey, now.
You don't owe capital gains tax. So you should always use that full up to the limit if you can, which means sell assets that have appreciated if you're in the 0% capital gains bracket. There's no rule that you can't buy them back right away. That's called a wash sale rule, and it only counts for if you're taking losses. So you can't take a loss on something, recognize a tax loss, and then buy it right back. But you can take a gain on something and buy it right back.
That's great.
Normally, that means the government's getting paid tax dollars, but in your case, you're in the 0% tax bracket. You want to take advantage of it.
That's great. Because if you, when the day comes that you're not in that tax bracket and you do sell those, you're going to pay taxes on all those gains. So it's a good idea. If you're in 0%, do it now. And when you rebuy, then your baseline comes up to the present price.
Right.
Makes a lot of sense.
I see that happen a lot of times with somebody who's, say, started a business and they maybe worked at a job and built up a fairly chunky investment portfolio over time. So they've got some assets, but they're in year one of brand new business and they made 30 grand this year. Mm-hmm. Well, let's take advantage of that and wipe out some tax burden on your investment portfolio.
That's a great tip. Good hack.
Okay, next, perform a quick audit of all your accounts. So a lot of times you moved jobs in the past year. Be sure you don't leave an old 401k somewhere that you don't want to leave it. I see people, you wouldn't believe it, Steven, but I see people leave old accounts and kind of forget they exist
Those
more
people.
often than you might guess. So Did you roll money over from one place to another? Be sure that here's something that happens. People do a rollover. They think, okay, I moved my IRA from this old advisor to this new advisor. And then they get paid dividends between the time that they rolled the money out. So the dividend, they've got $200 worth of dividends in an old account because the stocks were there when they went ex dividend, and that's where the dividends got put. Now they have $200 in an account that's just sitting out there, and often it just gets bled down with fees until it's zero. So
Sad.
move that stuff into one place. It's only $200, but it could be valuable to you.
Yep.
And then the other one, this doesn't really have financial implications, but I think it can have life organization implications. Is I see people with 6 or 7 checking and savings accounts all over the place that don't really have a purpose. It's not like, well, this is my business checking and this is my personal. It's, yeah, we've just kind of opened a few accounts and I've got some money there and some money here and this is a savings. And I just don't think that's valuable. I think you should consolidate and make things simple. There's a lot of tools, like my favorite online savings for most people is Ally Bank, and they'll let you have one account with infinite buckets inside of it where you can say, well, this is earmarked for travel and this is earmarked for my children and things like that. But it's just hard to keep track of everything if you've got, well, this is my Fifth Third account and this is my Wells Fargo account. By the way, did you say they're in the news again for having cheated people?
Yeah, they're not good.
I love being a Wells Fargo customer because it feels like once a quarter I get an email saying you are party to a class action lawsuit and here's some free money. So
it's one of the benefits of being a customer. I thought you were going to say it because I thought you were going to say that it conjures up images of the Old West where you put your money into this rickety old drafty building and you hope it's there 2 years from now.
Yeah, and that Jesse James didn't take it when it was going cross country in a stagecoach.
That's exactly right. When the Wells Fargo wagon is rolling down the street.
So that's why I think it's worth just looking at all your accounts going, am I forgetting anything? Because at the year end, it's a lot easier time to remember, oh yeah, we moved this from here to here, than in 10 years when you sit down with some advisor or something and they're going, do you have any other accounts? And you go, I don't think so.
Great tip. Perform a quick audit of accounts.
Last one. Update your frickin' estate plan.
Come on, people. Got to get on that.
Did you have kids this year?
No.
You should update your estate plan. Did anything change in your desires for what would happen to your children or your money if something happened to you? Update your estate plan.
Yeah.
Maybe you're at level 2 of estate planning and you don't just have a will and some powers of attorney and guardianship stuff. Maybe you've got a trust. Did you purchase new assets and title them to yourself even though you have a trust? You need to move those assets into your trust. So this is one that it's worth just a quick thought at least every year. It's worth a full-blown refresh from time to time every few years. But you should always be thinking, did anything major change and do I need to make changes? Even if you just have the bare minimum, which is a will, a healthcare power of attorney, which says this is the person that gets to make decisions for my healthcare if I'm not able to. A legal power of attorney, which is also very important, which means if I am incapacitated, this person has the right to act like me and get into my accounts.
It's very, very important.
And guardianship provisions for your kids. I say this all the time, but if you die at the same car crash as your spouse in the state of Utah, they consider that the husband died last and the kids go to the husband's next of kin. Now that could be perfect, or it could be a disaster. Depending on who you are. So don't let the state make the decision for you.
Never.
You make that decision.
Yes.
I think we're going to put a link into the show notes if you're hearing this and feeling condemnation. There's a tool that we often recommend. We get nothing from this. This is not a sponsorship. It's just a tool that I find very easy to use and slick, called Trust and Will. And if you click the link in the description, they gave me a link that gets you 10% off, which I think you can get all sorts of places with them. But
Sweet.
that's one option. You don't have to use them. You can use the Epic Will is another tool that I think is probably good. I haven't used it. You can use LegalZoom. You can freaking write your intentions on a piece of paper and go have it notarized, and that will be recognizable in court. It's not the best because you're probably forgetting things when you do it that way, but that's better than nothing.
But whatever it is, before the calendar page turns to 2023, for God's sake, have an estate plan for yourself and your descendants. Good grief.
Yeah, if you're a parent and you were saying, well, you started this off by saying the one thing I should do is a summit, but you're a parent and you don't have the stuff we're talking about here, then I'm gonna say this is more important. I'm sorry, but let's make sure that
before you get on the road to go to your summit.
Yeah. If you use Trust and Will, you can do your will in 30 minutes on your way to the summit, and you'll be out is whatever it costs you for the Delta Wi-Fi.
Sweet.
That's my list, Steven. That's comprehensive, but I'm just going to go through it real quick, titles only.
I love it.
Year-end financial checklist. Schedule an annual summit.
Boom.
Run a tax projection. Complete your retirement contributions. Generosity. Do your giving. Max out your HSA. Use your FSA money. Check in on your benefits. Consider whether bunching is right for you. Review your assets.
In some ways it is, some ways it isn't.
Correct. Yeah. Review your assets to take advantage of tax situations when you have options. This was like equity compensation and capital gains. Perform a quick audit of accounts. And lastly, please update your estate plan.
Yeah. Boy, what a great checklist. That's as you're talking, even having missed those precious first couple of bullet points, which I'll go back and listen to review. I'm so grateful that we have a technical expert on this podcast that can walk through the minutia of these really important plans. And I would hope that anybody who, as Mark's making these descriptions, go, oh gosh, that describes me. We have stock options with my company. Boy, I hope that you would mark that, forward it to your loved one and go, we got to get on this, which Rich reminds me, as I review 2023 for 2022 for Abraham's Wallet, I'm just so grateful of the way that we have grown. And I know that has much, 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 much to do with the fact that you people share impactful episodes that they hit you and you think, I know somebody else that needs to listen to this. When we grow organically like that, I love it because those organic connections are far more precious. Anybody that runs any kind of business knows this. They're far more precious than somebody randomly doing a search and finding you. So we appreciate that very much. And as Mark was talking about year-end giving, I just want to throw out before the year's out that we're so grateful. I'm sure we'll say this again in January. We're so grateful to those people who have made us part of their year-end giving. Very grateful for that. And my family, we're still in that. We just had this conversation last night. My wife and I we had these giving goals and we've hit them all and we want to give more before the end of the year. So let's talk about what we do with those. And we're so grateful that anybody puts us on that list anywhere at all. So thank you to our listeners for a great year. And there's so much value in just this one episode that I'm buoyed by the value that people get out of this simple free podcast. It's great.
Yeah. I'm also, I tell the story a lot about how I became a financial planner, which started with Abraham's Wallet and you and I just deciding, hey, this is a gap in the content that's being provided out there. Let's talk about money. And then that grew and people started wanting one-on-ones. And it's just it's really, really cool for me to look back and go, not only did this content project that we thought was going to serve our 10 friends grow into something that serves way more families than we could have imagined. But and not only did that lead to full-time work for both of us, but it's also now its own 501c3 charitable organization that could grow to do new things. And you've started investigating completely new kind of content that might be coming in the coming, 12 to 18 months. And
Yes, indeed.
whatever that ends up looking like, I'm very thankful for it. So my closing questions are two. One, how are we going to get at the front of this episode some sort of teaser that if you turned it on and heard Mark apologize that it was going to be a solo episode and turned it off, how do we save that conversion?
You know what? Here, we'll do it right now, and I'll rip it out and throw it at the beginning. Why not? Hey, everybody, Mark's about to say that this episode is only him, but he's about to lie. You're about to hear a lie from Mark because later in the episode, I will jump in like an uninvited stranger, like Kramer crashing in the door. I'm jumping in at about 15 minutes. So Mark sometimes feels that people don't want to listen to him alone because I don't know what he thinks he's too dry or he's too smart for the regular person. That's what he tells me when the cameras aren't rolling. But anyways, the dumb guy, the loud mouth, me, I'll be there too. So just hang on and enjoy this episode. Here we go. There it is.
All right. Fair.
Yeah. Second question.
I have an additional hour and 7 minutes now that was unplanned for, and it's squat day. So that's what's going to happen in this hour and 7 minutes. So I got to now decide how to mentally and physically prepare to go do some squats. And I'm thinking maybe like a breakfast croissant and a cup of coffee. I don't know.
Okay, that sounds great. Is that a question?
No, it's just me being
that's wonderful. And
you won't be doing any eating today, though. I don't think.
No, I don't feel great about that option for myself. Now, those who did the house tour with the Parretts, see this link right here, the house tour with the Parretts. If you saw that, then you're aware that if Mark walks out to his right and walks across the hallway, he has what he calls a bonus room, and it's really an everything room. Is that where you're going to be doing your squatting?
No, I have to go. That room we investigated turning into a home gym, and we're told if you deadlift in this room, you will drop the bar through the floor onto your pickup truck.
Okay. And you opted against that?
I did. Okay. I am going to be headed to the local gymnasium.
Wonderful. Okay, well, the little button I have for the end is a little unconventional for us, but I feel struck to do it. And I know this is coming out right at the very, very tail end of the year. We haven't talked to people about, having any sort of prayer time or worship time at the end of the year. Although those can be really great things to do with your small community around you. In that vein, however, I'd like to bless everybody here at the end of the year and throw a little prayer out. So I'm going to ask that if you're listening to us at quick speed, so you can get through all of my words and a way to make the most efficient use of your time, that you slow that down, take a breath. If you're driving, just kind of take a breath. And I just want you to agree with me as I pray. Okay. Lord, I'm praying for every person that's listening and all of these families, because one thing I know about them is that they are at least interested, if not wholly given over to wanting to lead their family in a way that honors you. And I just want to say thank you, God, for your provision and your protection in all of 2022. You have been so kind to us. You have kept our hearts beating. You have sustained our families. And I just want to throw faith forward for the next 12 months. And we just want to say, we know that we will see the goodness of God in the land of the living. So if there's any despair or hopelessness or fatigue in these families. I'm asking that in this window of time here, this end of year, when you kind of catch your breath and you get ready to start rocking it again in January, I ask God that you would restore hope, whether it's marriage troubles and there is a sense of despair in marriage troubles. I ask that there would be hope with a renewed confidence. You chose this spouse for me. You know what's best. And I give myself to your intentions, that there would be a renewed commitment to parenting our children in a way that honors you and trains them up in your ways. And God, I pray for each one of these families that there would be blessing financially in their businesses, their investments, even the giving that they're going to be doing at the end of the year. We ask that everybody that writes a check between now and the end of the year, that God, you would multiply that money to do your work on planet Earth. And I bless these families again with hope. God, we trust in your hope for the future. We just believe that there's great things coming. Whatever happens in our country in the next year, whatever happens politically, whatever happens from an international global crisis standpoint, any of those things, what we know is that you're going to be with us in the coming year, and you will show yourself strong on our behalf. We trust you, Lord, and I bless these families in the strong name of Yeshua, the Messiah that was waited for and who incarnated and who we celebrate right now. Thank you and amen.
Amen.